Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Gardener's Shed podcast. In this episode today, this is my 5th season of running my gardening business. When it rolls around to August, it's going to be 5 years since I started my business. I can't believe how quickly it's gone. And the reason for this video, actually, I was talking... I didn't meet up with him. I was doing a gardening job, and there was a chap I used to work with at my old place, and he was a really, really nice guy. And he worked that's the only job he's ever had. He's only ever worked for one company. He was taken on as an apprentice. And to be fair, I think the bloke looked after him to an extent, but it's not fantastic working there, so, it's probably a double-edged form of looking after. But he worked there he worked there as his first job, so whenever he left school, 16 presumably, and, he's probably touching 40 now. And that's the only job he's ever known, and if you'd have said to me, would he ever leave that job? Or, any other option, I would have picked anything over than him leaving the job. I'm not saying he's institutionalised, but he's, I think he's probably the longest serving bloke there. And, he had his ups and downs there, but he was, he loved his job. Well, I don't even think he loved his job. I think he stuck with it because of his situation. And I was gardening, and I just got my mower out, and I saw this big white transit van, and I saw him stick his head out and put his foot up. He says, "You all right?" And I just could not believe it. Just couldn't believe it at all. It was absolutely, as I said, if you'd have said to me, "What, would this chap ever leave?" I would have said no. I'd have put him as retired off or body bagged off, not quitting of his own accord and going self-employed. So his sort of thing is much the same as mine, that he was in a job where I presume he enjoyed at some point, but towards the end. But this chap, credit to him, he's got 3 kids, and he says to me that the job he's working at, where I used to work, they had money problems and he hadn't been paid for 6 weeks. And mentally, I might see if he wants to come on the podcast, to be fair. Mentally, it was destroying him mentally. He says that he was, no better off working there. He'd not been paid for 6 weeks. His missus worked there as well, so she'd not been paid for 6 weeks, so they had no money coming in for 6 weeks. And stuff like that, it puts people behind. Even if you put it all on credit cards, you're always going to be behind, really. So, he said that he just had enough, and the tipping point for him was, I think he had a lot of breakdown, but as close to. But he said to himself that for him, the impetus of it was he'd already been off, and then he went back, and then the bloke, above him was riding him, getting him do this, work harder. He said he just wanted a break. It was his scheduled break time. And this chap was, no, we need to get it done, all this. And he says, look, I've had enough. And he just walked out. And he says, for him, it's probably the hardest thing he's done. But also, he's been in it a month so far, and he says he loves it. Absolutely loves it. So I'm going to ask him if he wants to come on the podcast, to be fair, because it's an interesting thing. And it's one what we all sort of put up with. We all sort of put up with people in jobs and situations. So... yeah, credit to him. So I'm going to talk in this episode about my gardening journey, and it's been, like I said, this is coming up for its 5th season. It doesn't seem too long since COVID, in all fairness, but it's only 5 years since the end of first. Well, in August it's going to be the 5 years since the first lockdown lifted. And I think first off, I'll just talk about when I left. There was a lot of people. Not a lot of people, because I've not got a huge amount of people around me, but it's like anything. You only remember the really, really good, or you only remember the really, really bad. And I had people, I had the naysayers, stick where you are, all this and all that. Do you think you'll be able to do it? And then, at the place where I worked, I heard of a few people saying he'd never do it. And you know, I think to myself, I don't have any ill feeling towards him in all fairness. I just think there's people out there that don't want other people to do better than them, or, you know, or as they think do better than them. I think people are just happy for, I genuinely think there's people out there that just want people to be miserable, and I think those people that said that to me or behind my back, they just want to be miserable. So I'm not going to give you the 5 years, you know, and think, yeah, I'm going to go through a couple of my sort of major tipping points, really. So the first one, well, not tipping points, but I'd say milestones, really. So for me, the first one was a chap I used to work with, and in all fairness, towards the end, I felt like I was employed by him, and he was a difficult bloke, but he was a simple bloke, you know, in all fairness. His property was very straightforward, and in reality, the job, it shouldn't have been a hard gardening job. In all fairness as well, it should have been a more better paid job, because looking at his situation and his, you know, the size of the house, how many cars were on the drive, you know, his disposable income, you know, he had a big Land Rover Discovery, and it's not a new Discovery, it's an old one, and he's sunk a lot of money into that, you know. So he's got the disposable income to sink a lot of money into a, you know, a toy, basically, as in thousands. You know, I remember he said once he had to have, you know, a whole new chassis on it because it rough, but you know what I mean. So realistic, the job should have been better paid, and it should have been simple. It's a very straightforward property. And I remember thinking to myself after the fact that I went for this sort of, not interview, but it felt like an interview in terms of, you know, how he spoke to me. It just needed somebody to just maintain it. And he says to me, oh, well, I don't understand, people come and they just don't get what I'm after. And I suppose in hindsight, it's because he was a nightmare. But I put up with that, and I put up with that for a few years. And the tipping point for me was I was earning more and more, and doing more and more, and working, you know, easier and easier, if that makes sense. That his low-paid, hard-working job, it just wasn't viable anymore. And I think I've told this story before, how I actually got to stop working for him. Was being brutally upfront and honest, and in all fairness, that's the best way with this chap. This chap lived and breathed business. He ran his whole life as a business. One of the things that fascinated me was he had a big house, he had a Porsche on the drive, this toy Land Rover, you know, he had a nice car himself, and Mrs. had a nice car. And I remember going into his office once, and he had one of those pin things where you put post-it notes through, and it was absolutely full of lottery tickets from the bottom to the top. There must have been, I dread to think, 500, probably 1,000 lottery tickets. You know, you imagine how many pieces of paper you can stack one on top of the other. Well, this thing was full. And one of the things that fascinated me there and then was I looked at him, and, you know, him and his missus went on holiday. I remember him telling me that they were going first class. So the price for, you know, a first class ticket for two people, I could probably get 2 or 3 years worth of holidays in the camper van for that, if you get what I mean. And you know, so they had a good quality of life, first class travel, nice cars, nice job, you know, big lovely house. And I thought to myself, what are you playing the lottery for? You know, in reality, how will the winning lottery affect your quality of life? I don't think it will, to be fair. I just think he'll have more money in his bank. So, and I think that's what he likes. So, as I said, he's very, very business orientated. And I actually said to him that it was a combination of, I think our word, it was, I don't want to work for you, and I can't work for you anymore because I'm earning elsewhere. I'm earning more closer to where I live. I'm travelling 40 minutes to you, and it's just not financially viable anymore. Now, to say that to any other customer, and this is what I say about, you know, customers and situations and people, is everybody's different, every customer's different, every situation's different. You wouldn't dream of saying that, but in all fairness, that chap respected me. And he actually said to me, he says, well, if you think you can get more, well, I'll have to look for somebody else. Not, oh, well, if you are getting more, and as I say, just disbelief. And I think back on that, and I'll be honest with you, I was driving, I was out in the camper van actually, and I saw him pulled up at the side of the road, because I still remember his number plate, and I still remember his little toy Land Rover. And I was tempted to just pull in and have a chat with him, and not, I don't believe in rubbing people's faces in it, but part of me would like just to say to him that, well, you know, business is going well. Basically just tell him that, you know, I am earning more than what you were paying, and I'm earning a lot more than what you were paying. But to me, that almost borders on being petty. I don't like being petty. So that was one of the turning points for me. And in all fairness, the gardening work wasn't bad. It was a straightforward property. It was, you know, 2 big lawns at the front. There was no borders to speak of really. There was nothing really. It was a very, very simple job. He had a beech hedge all the way around and shrubs. And as I said, it was a very, very simplistic place. But it was, well, made less simplistic by him basically. But anyway. So we're going to skip forward a few years, and one of the things that's been a big changing point for me happened recently. And that was the storage situation. So I went from, now how I run my business is I'm a big believer, if I can get a piece of equipment to make my life easier, I will buy it. There's no two ways about it. So as such, and as well, I'm a big believer in, you can't just have one lawnmower as a gardener. I understand if, you know, financially you're capped or you don't need it, but for me, I do different properties with different size gardens, and yes, it could be viable for me just to have, say, one mower for all of them. You know, I always think, well, if it lets you down, or, you know, I think a small mower can mow potentially any size lawn, but a big mower, you know, a big 21-inch mower, I use the Stihl ones. I find them all right, to be fair. I find them nice and light and manoeuvrable. But even then, on some of the properties I do, it would be doable, but it wouldn't be doable, if that makes sense. It would be difficult. So that's why I have not a fleet of mowers, but I have a range of mowers, should I say. I've got a little Stihl roller mower. I've got a Stihl 21-inch 6 series mower. I've got the 21-inch roller mower, which oddly enough I don't use at all really. I've only used it a few times. I did get a really good deal. I think I paid like £900 brand new for it. So even if you factor in depreciation, if I decided to sell it, I'm going to get, you know, not all my money back, but another thing as well, it's in the shed, it's got aspen in, it's not going to do any harm for me really. But the container has been the big one. One of the things that caused me the most stress and problems was storage. Where I live, it's clutter. It's stuff for other people to worry about and trip over, even though it was tucked away. You know, I remember going and having to swap equipment every night, and it was just a ball ache. But the container on a dedicated site that's safe and secure, with, you know, you've got 20 foot by 8 foot of room, has been, like I said, an absolute game changer. It really has. It's made my working life, and to an extent my personal life, it's made it a lot easier. It really has. Having one space to store everything has been really useful, and I think it's helped my business to grow. It's, you know, it's like the little moss brush fits in perfect, the chipper fits in perfect, all the other stuff, the power washer, that fits in perfect as well. So I'm going to just get it not wrapped up pretty quick, but I want to just do a mention of a customer that's changed the direction that my business has gone for the better. So we talked about the earlier chap. I'll name him actually. His name was Greg. As I said, I've got no ill feeling against Greg, but But this next customer, I won't mention it, but I've said this on my channel, or my other channel, my YouTube channel. So I do exterior cleaning as well, and my brother worked with her husband, and he got talking. It must have come up in conversation about the gutters, and he said basically she needs hers doing. So I went down and gave her a quote, did the job, and she said to me, oh, would you be able to come up and you know, do my workplace? I'll give you a call. I said, yeah, no problem. And it's the solicitors, and never heard a bean off her. Didn't hear a dicky bird. And what ended up happening was, I eventually got a call 2 months, well, probably not 2 months, but you know, weeks later, and it was, yeah, come down, do it, all that sort of stuff. So I went down, did it, and did the job. And I'll be honest with you, I did it when they were in, as in when all the staff were in. So there was a bit of moving of cars. Now I still do it now, to be fair, but I do it on a Sunday. I take my generator and I do it, you know, when no one's there, basically. Simpler. So did the gutters, and a couple of people come out and wanted prices for theirs. That didn't lead to anything, but that sort of got me foot in the door. And then I had another phone call about, again, probably a month later, a little bit more, and it was, would you be, basically, they, women being solicitors, they look after people's house, so they act as like power attorney or whatever when people pass away. And this chap, he'd passed away, and they were the power attorney, you know, there's nobody there, they were in charge of everything. And they said, well, Luke, could you give this guy's garden a tidy up, because the neighbours are starting to complain. And I said, yes, that's no problem. And I'll put in a quote. And I got the quote, you know, it all went through. But whilst we were there, she said she's got to find somebody to clear the properties and empty it. And I said to her, I said, a bit of a matter of the fact. So I remember my brother being there at the time. And I said, well, I can clear it for you. And I was looking around, and I was seeing, to me, hours and waste. And the waste would be covered by skips, which she pays for. And all I saw it as was just muscle, as in moving stuff around. And I can move stuff around. So that's how I got the first house clearance. And I'll be honest with you, it's not snowballed, but we're on our fourth house clearance now, and it went really, really, it's been a real positive change for the business. Over the years, I've made decisions. So I remember going from hourly to fixed price. I remember saying to myself, right, no more hourly work, as in no more new hourly work. And since then, I've never charged a new hourly price. You know, I remember having a take with customers where it's like, right, we need to, you know, toughen up the business, as in not let people run, you know, riots over me. And this one as well, with the house clearances, has been another shift in another direction for the business, and another positive shift as well. So we did that house clearance. So now, this isn't a history on my house clearances, but when I say it's been a real shift and a real change in the business, it really, really has. It's meant that I've got an alternative income stream. I've got an income stream that's not been affected by the weather. So I remember doing the first house clearance, and I remember it was when we had all that bad rain, and we had, I think it felt like weeks of rain. It wasn't when it was months of rain, but I remember the whole country, you know, you saw on Facebook groups, people were like, oh, I wish this rain would go and all this, and it was really, really howling down. And I did the house clearance at that time, and I was doing it, and it really, really helped to, you know, basically give that sort of other income stream. And it was such a useful thing, it was such a bonus. You know, it really, really helped, because I remember thinking, I'm glad I'm doing this, opposed to being stuck you know, trying to earn a living when it's pouring down with rain. So I was really happy at that. So, you know, as I said, it's since gone on to being just the fourth house clearance as well. It's not just the fee for the house clearance, I do the gardening as well. So I've got, you know, a guaranteed property until it's sold with guaranteed visits. That, you know, up until now, touch wood, there's been no change, no cutting back. You know, no like, oh well, even over the winter, there's been visits, regular visits every 4 weeks. You know, it's like this latest one now, I have to go feed his fish every week. So, you know, it's stuff like that. So as well, you get the gardening fee and also keeping an eye on the property. So it's, when I say it's been not just rewarding financially, it's been rewarding, you know, mentally as well, because it's a visit. Or, you know, at one point I had two on the go, and it was, you know, it was, if you had a bad afternoon or you got rained off for the afternoon, you could have a visit. You know, you go do these 2 visits. They weren't so much weather dependent, and it meant that I was getting paid for that afternoon or that weekend or that day off. You know, it mean that, you know, money was coming in still. So I was very happy with that. And like I said, it really has, it's going to be keep changing it because something else has come from it as well. But it's really changed the way I look at my business and run my business. So this last one was a positive and a negative impact. So I've never ever been properly ill. You know, I've had the mad shits for a few weeks. You know, nothing. You know, as I said, I've never been properly ill. But I think it was 3 years ago. It was September time, end of August, start of September. So, you know, very much still in the season. And I was out and about. You know, I went to a robot event and just felt really ill, properly, you know, just like sick and tired and ill. So I, you know, I was in, you know, near to York, so it was a good 2.5 hour trip. I'll be honest with you, I don't know how I got home. I was really ill. I just felt so sick and just tired. So I managed to get home and I just went straight to bed, and it didn't improve. There was no shift, no improvement. I remember cancelling Monday's work and Tuesday's work and Wednesday's work. There was just no improvement at all. In the end, the symptoms and the pain got that bad that I had to, I'm not afraid to admit it, and this is one thing that winds me up, is people who call ambulances for stupid reasons. So I called the ambulance and I felt stupid because I was just in so much pain. But even then, and I remember them coming out and they diagnosed me, I had a urine infection. I thought, fucking hell, I've never had one of them. So they, you know, diagnosed me with that, gave me some medicine, and then they went away. And I think it was either the next day or the day after, I was just getting worse and worse. I just felt so bad. It was still during COVID, but not during COVID as in, I think everywhere else you didn't have to wear a mask, but you did in the hospital still. So I remember toddling off to A&E actually. You know, I said right to my dad, well, I went to the doctors and the doctor said, Luke, go straight A&E. You know, I think something's happening, just go straight to A&E. So I went up to A&E and won't go into it all, but basically about 3 hours later I was emergency off, you know, big operation. And what had ended up happening was I had a perforated bowel, or my bowel had burst as I call it. And and it went from, you know, a week before fine, no problem. There was no symptoms, nothing. Like there was nothing that caused it, you know, no build up, you know, nothing like that. And then the following week, you know, hospital, big op, colostomy bag, you know, getting used to that, you know, and also being off from work. And I was off from work for about, I think it was New Year by the time I started going back to work. And when I say I started, it was very incremental, very small stuff. And I'll be honest with you, it was the most terrified I've ever been in my life, because at this point in time I think it was my second year being self-employed. Everything was going well. The customers, fully booked, all that sort of stuff. Work was coming in. And I remember, I think one of the things I did before, because he didn't take me straight down, but I remember just sending a text message to all my customers, basically saying to them that, look, I've been rushed into hospital, I don't know what's happening, I don't know when I'll be back, but I will keep you updated. And then that was it. And I woke up, and basically I was, woke up about 3 or 4 days later, because I had to go in intensive care. And yeah, so so I won't give it a whole story, but got through it, got better. But one of the things I remember was turning my phone back on, and there was just loads of all the customers had replied, and it all said, "Luke, Sam, don't worry." Even the shit customers were like, "Oh, it's nearly the end of the season anyway, so don't worry." I suppose that's the best from them. But everybody else was so supportive, so happy, so positive, so nice, And, it was just, like I said, it was a weight off my mind. So when I started back in the new season, everybody was, really, really nice. I remember a few of my customers, they said to me, "Luke, we're not pressuring you, but I've got work. I'm not pressuring you, but if you want to work, it's there, but I only want you to do 2 hours a day." I remember one bloke, he limited me to 2 hours a day at his place. And he didn't have to, but he did, because he wanted his place to look nice. He wanted to give me work, so it worked out wow. And like I said, it was really, really appreciative. And as I said, I didn't lose any customer. There was only one customer that had a quote from somebody else. Everybody else stuck with me, and even that customer did. Everybody stuck with me, everybody kept with me. And like I said, it's been the hardest point of my gardening journey, but now I've come through it stronger. The only problem is I had to have the reversal surgery last year to get rid of a colostomy bag, and then the end of this year I've got to have a hernia op, so it has left me with complications, as in hernias, and that itself brings in a world of its own little mini problems. Having to say to customers, I can't do the weeding because of the hernia, and it's true. It's I can push a mower, I can cut a hedge, I can sweep up, I can do all the gardening work, but the thing that really does finish me off is bending up and down. I can work on my knees, it doesn't bother me, but constantly getting up and down, or bending down, or pulling when I'm bending down is lethal, and I can feel it, and I can feel it pulling, and it's horrible, it really is. And I just have to say to customers, and all of my regular customers know the situation, they know what I can and can't do, they know that I'll try and look after their property, and I do. I've changed things, I've added things. I remember one of the first things I did was get the leaf grabbers, so I'm not bending down, So, it's little things like that I've changed, and also work. Off the back of that, I had a not a hospital scare, but I'd been battling on, and this is the thing, I still tried to battle on. I remember going back to work, and once I was back fit, I remember trying to do the jobs I used to do, the weeding, the borders. And there was one point where there was a customer, and they missed a brown bin or something, they didn't pick it up. So I said to him, "Well, look, I'm doing a tip run, I'll go and do it for you, I'll tip it out." And it was heavy, proper, it wasn't full, but it was heavy. And I remember tipping it out, and I must have pulled something. Well, anyway, that night I was in hospital again, because I think I thought I had a twisted hernia, and Jesus Christ, it was the most painful thing I've ever had in my life. And I remember saying to that customer, I've emptied the bin, I've dropped it back around your house, never got a thank you off for nothing. And I spent a day, well, nearly a day and a half in hospital. And there was that, just the physical side, and then there was the mental side as well. I had customers that were, I just don't want to work for, because they're nightmares basically. So like the Brendas and, you know, the Charlies and all that. And what ended up happening is, you know, I sat down, I looked at all my customers, and I wrote down all the shit people, all the rubbish customers. I wrote down, and I think I had about 5 or 6 names, because some of them were just terrible, awful people, and a couple of them actually were nice people, but I couldn't do the garden because it was either, you know, there was one lady that I used to do the garden for, and it was, you know, you'd be carrying your mower up 2 flights of steps and mowing a super steep hill. And I'll be honest with you, I just thought to myself, I don't want to do that. There was another one I didn't want to do because it was just too mauling. Like I said, I'd already spent, you know, a day and a bit in hospital. I don't want it. So I rung around all them customers, and I told them all. And don't get me wrong, Brenda was apocalyptic, you know, but I didn't care, because after that I didn't look at my diary and think, oh, I've got to go to such and such in 2 weeks' time after I'd just been. You know, I didn't dread my diary. So again, that's another takeaway point that I'd say, if you're in that situation where you're dreading customers, dreading the work, just get rid of them. So that's the sort of the big sort of up and downs over the 5 years for me. But the business is doing well, I'm doing well. We're looking at, you know, always doing what we can to improve it, and myself. So have a good day, guys. As usual, keep on gardening.